Before we start, tell me where you are listening from in the comments. Maybe you are someone who works constantly and tells yourself that providing for your family is the most important way to show love. Maybe you think that successful people have figured out how to balance career ambitions with being present for their children. Maybe you have never experienced a moment when a single innocent question from your child forced you to confront the painful truth about what your priorities actually communicate. This conversation is for you. I want to tell you about the question that shattered my heart and changed everything, about how I understand success, fatherhood, and what it means to be truly present for the people who matter most. A question so simple and innocent that it took me completely off guard, but so devastating in its implications that I could not sleep for weeks afterward. This was not about business challenges or technical problems or any of the complex issues that consume most of my mental energy. This was about a 5-year-old boy trying to understand why his father always seemed to be somewhere else, even when he was physically in the same room. Today I want to share this story because I believe many driven, ambitious parents are making the same mistakes I was making, convincing themselves that working harder to provide better opportunities for their children justifies being absent from the small moments that actually shape childhood memories and emotional development. This question forced me to confront the uncomfortable truth that success without presence is a form of failure, that achievement without connection is ultimately hollow, and that no amount of professional accomplishment can compensate for missing the brief window when your children are young enough to want your attention and old enough to remember whether you gave it to them. The question came from my son X, who was 5 years old at the time and had been trying to get my attention for what felt like forever, but was probably only about 10 minutes. I was sitting in my home office in Austin on a Saturday afternoon, supposedly taking a break from work to spend time with my children, but actually reviewing Neuralink development reports while they played nearby. X had been working on a drawing that he was excited to show me, something elaborate involving rockets and planets and what he called brain computers, that he had been creating for over an hour. He kept approaching my desk and starting to explain what he had drawn, but I was distracted by technical problems that seemed urgent and important at the time, responding with non-committal sounds and brief glances that clearly communicated that I was not really listening. After several attempts to share his artwork with me, X stood quietly beside my chair for a long moment, holding his drawing and watching me type responses to emails that could have waited until Monday. When I finally looked up and asked him what he needed, expecting him to show me his picture so I could give it the quick approval he was seeking, he asked a question that I was completely unprepared for. He said, "Daddy, why do you love your computer more than you love me?" The words hit me like a physical blow that temporarily paralyzed my ability to respond. I stared at his face, seeing confusion and hurt in his 5-year-old eyes, and realized that my son genuinely did not understand why I seemed more interested in screens than in him, based on how I had been behaving. From his perspective, computers and phones and tablets received my focused attention, my enthusiasm, my creative energy, and my time, while he received distracted responses, delayed gratification, and promises that we would spend quality time together after I finished whatever project was currently consuming my thoughts. My immediate instinct was to reassure him that, of course, I loved him more than any computer, that my work was important because it was creating a better future for him and his siblings, that everything I did was motivated by wanting to provide opportunities and security for our family. But as I looked at his face and tried to form those words, I realized that my explanations would sound like excuses to a 5-year-old who just wanted his father to be present and engaged when they were together. He was not asking about my long-term intentions or my underlying motivations. He was asking about his daily experience of competing with technology for my attention and losing. I put down my phone and really looked at X for the first time that afternoon, seeing not just a child who wanted to show me his drawing, but a person who was learning what love looks like based on how I chose to allocate my time and attention. I realized that no matter what I said in response to his question, my behavior over the previous months and years had already provided the answer he was hearing. That despite loving him deeply and working toward goals that I believed would benefit his future, I had been consistently demonstrating that other things were more important than being present with him. I told him that I loved him more than anything in the world, including any computer, and that I was sorry for not showing that clearly enough. I asked him to explain his drawing to me, and I put away all my devices and gave him my complete attention for the next hour. But that night, after putting the children to bed, I sat in my bedroom and cried harder than I had cried since my mother called me about my father's death. Not just because of the pain in X's voice when he asked that question, but because of what his question revealed about the gap between my intentions as a father and the reality of my children's daily experience. I realized that I had been telling myself a story about working hard to create opportunities for my children while actually using work as an escape from the emotional demands and vulnerability that come with being truly present for another person's life. It is easier to solve complex engineering problems than to sit quietly and listen to a 5-year-old explain his thoughts about why robots need to be nice to people and whether aliens would want to be friends with humans. It is easier to respond to urgent messages than to be patient with a child who is learning to write his letters or struggling with puzzles that seem simple to an adult but are genuinely challenging for someone still developing basic motor skills. It is easier to feel important and productive while working on projects that could affect millions of people than to slow down and be present for one small person who needs you to care about his drawings and his questions about how rockets work and whether the brain computers he imagines could help people who are sad feel happy again. X's question forced me to confront the uncomfortable truth that I had been using my work as a form of emotional avoidance, hiding behind the importance of my projects to avoid the harder work of being emotionally available and consistently present for my children. I had been telling myself that quantity time mattered less than quality time, but providing very little of either because I was always partially distracted by whatever crisis or opportunity was demanding my attention. I had been convincing myself that my children would understand, when they got older, that my work was important and that my focus on technology was motivated by love and responsibility. But 5-year-olds do not think about abstract concepts like humanity's future or technological progress. They think about whether their father seems happy to see them when he comes home and whether he chooses to be present when they want to share something important. Over the following days, I kept replaying X's question and thinking about what it revealed about my priorities and how those priorities were being communicated to my children through my daily choices about where to focus my time and attention. I realized that my children were learning what love looks like, not from what I said about caring for them, but from observing how I actually spent my time and what seemed to generate genuine enthusiasm and engagement from me. They were watching me light up when I talked about Starship development or Neuralink breakthroughs or Tesla production milestones, and they were noticing that I rarely showed the same level of excitement about their drawings or their stories about their friends or their questions about the world. They were hearing me take calls during family dinners because business issues seemed too urgent to postpone, and they were learning that other people's needs often took priority over family time. They were seeing me work late into the night and on weekends, and they were drawing conclusions about what was really important to their father based on how I chose to spend my discretionary time. Most painfully, I realized that my children were accommodating my limitations as a father rather than me rising to meet their legitimate needs for attention, presence, and emotional engagement. They had learned not to interrupt me when I was working, not to expect sustained attention when I was home, and not to share their most important thoughts and questions with me, because I was usually too distracted to really listen. X's question made me understand that this accommodation was not maturity or understanding on their part, but resignation to having a father who was physically present but emotionally absent much of the time. I started thinking about what I wanted my children to remember about their childhood and what lessons I was actually teaching them through my behavior rather than my words. Did I want them to remember a father who was always working on important projects but never had time for their projects? Did I want them to learn that love meant providing technological advancement but not emotional presence? Did I want them to grow up believing that screens and devices were more interesting than human connection? Did I want them to develop the same addictive relationship with technology that was preventing me from being present for their lives? Did I want them to struggle with the same inability to prioritize relationships over achievements that was causing me to miss their childhood? Most importantly, did I want them to reach adulthood feeling like they had never really known their father as a person, beyond his public image and his relationship with computers and rockets? These questions were devastating because I realized that my current trajectory was leading toward exactly those outcomes. That despite loving my children deeply and wanting the best possible life for them, I was actually teaching them through my behavior that they were less important than my work. The irony was particularly painful because much of my work involves developing technologies that are supposed to enhance human connection and capability, but I was using those same technologies in ways that disconnected me from the most important humans in my life. I was working on neural interfaces that could help people communicate more effectively while failing to communicate meaningfully with my own son. I was developing rockets that could take humans to other planets while being emotionally unavailable to the humans living in my own house. I began making immediate changes to how I structured my time and attention. I started putting away old devices during family meals and bedtime routines, treating those commitments as seriously as any board meeting or engineering review. I blocked out specific times each week for individual attention with each of my children, during which I focused entirely on their interests and questions without any work distractions. I started asking them about their days, their friends, their worries, and their dreams, and actually listening to their answers instead of providing quick responses while thinking about other things. I began participating in their activities and games, even when those activities seemed simple or repetitive to me, because I realized that sharing experiences was more important than finding those experiences intellectually stimulating. Most importantly, I started showing genuine enthusiasm for their accomplishments and interests, recognizing that my approval and attention meant more to them than any external validation or achievement. But the changes were harder to implement consistently than I had expected. Decades of conditioning had trained my mind to constantly scan for problems that needed solving, messages that required immediate responses, and opportunities that demanded urgent attention. Learning to be present required conscious effort to notice when my attention was drifting toward work problems and deliberately redirect it back to whatever my children were saying or doing in the moment. It required accepting that some business decisions could wait, some emails did not need immediate responses, and some opportunities might be missed because I was choosing to prioritize family time over professional advancement. It required developing comfort with the slower pace and different rhythms of childhood, where conversations meander and activities take longer than they need to, and questions often do not have clear answers, but are asked for the joy of wondering rather than the need to know. Most importantly, it required accepting that being present for my children's emotional and creative development was not less important than working on technologies that could benefit humanity, but was actually a crucial part of raising humans who would contribute positively to the world. 6 months after X asked his heartbreaking question, he approached me one evening while I was reading in the living room and asked if he could show me something he had been working on. I immediately closed my book and gave him my complete attention. He had created an elaborate drawing that showed a rocket ship with windows, where you could see a father and son sitting together, looking out at stars and planets. Below the rocket, he had written in his careful 5-year-old handwriting, "Me and Daddy exploring space together." As X explained his drawing to me, describing how the father and son in the rocket were talking about all the interesting things they could see and learning about the universe together, I realized that he was not just sharing his artwork, but was expressing his hopes about our relationship and his understanding of how to balance important work with family connection. His drawing showed that he understood that my work with rockets and space exploration was meaningful and exciting, but he also wanted to be included in that excitement rather than competing with it for my attention. That night, I started a new tradition with X and my other children, where we spend time each week talking about their dreams for the future, the problems they want to solve when they grow up, and how they might contribute to making the world better. These conversations have become some of the most meaningful parts of my week, not just because they help me stay connected to my children's inner lives, but because they often provide insights and perspectives that influence how I think about my own work and priorities. I have learned that children ask profound questions that adults stop asking because we think we already know the answers, that their curiosity and wonder can reignite your own sense of possibility and purpose. That being present for their development can be just as intellectually stimulating as any business challenge or technical problem. X often asks questions about whether the brain computers I am developing will help people understand each other better, or whether rockets to Mars should be designed so that families can travel together, or whether artificial intelligence will be able to draw pictures and tell stories the way humans do. These questions have influenced how I think about the human implications of the technologies we are developing, reminding me that the ultimate purpose of innovation should be to enhance rather than replace human connection and creativity. I have also learned that time moves faster than you realize when you are focused on long-term goals and abstract achievements. That the window for being central to your children's lives is brief and cannot be recovered once it passes. That the memories your children carry into adulthood are shaped more by ordinary moments of connection than by extraordinary experiences or expensive opportunities. Most importantly, I have learned that success without strong relationships with your children is ultimately hollow. That professional achievement cannot compensate for missing their childhood, and that being remembered as a great innovator means nothing if your own children remember you as a stranger who is always too busy to really know them. X recently told me that when he grows up, he wants to work on rockets and brain computers like me, but he also wants to make sure he has time to draw pictures with his kids and answer all their questions. He said that computers are smart, but daddies are more important because they can give hugs and help you feel better when you are sad. That conversation made me realize that the changes I made in response to his devastating question 2 years ago have not just improved our relationship, but have helped him develop a healthier understanding of how to balance technological advancement with human connection, achievement with presence, and working on important problems with being available for the people who depend on you. His original question, "Daddy, why do you love your computer more than you love me?" taught me that children evaluate love not based on what you say or what you provide, but based on how you choose to spend your time and attention when you are with them. That being present is not about perfection or constant availability, but about genuine engagement when you are together and consistent prioritization of their emotional needs over your professional demands. That your children's questions about your priorities are actually invitations to examine whether your daily choices align with your deepest values and long-term goals for your family relationships. The question also taught me that the technologies I spend my life developing should enhance rather than replace human connection, and that the most important application of any innovation is strengthening the bonds between people who care about each other. If you are someone who works constantly and tells yourself that advancing technology or building companies justifies being absent from your children's daily lives, if you struggle to be present when you are with your children because digital demands seem more urgent than their needs, if you have never asked your children what they really think about how you balance screens and family, I want you to know that it is never too late to change these patterns. Your children need your presence more than they need your achievements. They need your attention more than they need your success. They need to know that they matter to you more than any device, screen, or technological breakthrough you could be working on. Sometimes the most important questions come from the people who depend on you most for love and guidance. Sometimes a 5-year-old's innocent inquiry can reveal truths about your priorities that you have been avoiding or rationalizing for years. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is put away your phone, close your laptop, and really listen to what your children are trying to tell you about what they need from you as their parent. My son asked one question that broke my heart, but answering it honestly and changing my behavior in response may have been the most important work I have ever done. More important than any rocket launch, more significant than any technological breakthrough, more valuable than any business achievement. Because ultimately, the most advanced technology in the universe is the love between a parent and child, and no amount of artificial intelligence or neural interfaces or space exploration can replicate the irreplaceable value of being truly present for another human being who depends on you for everything. Share this with someone who might need to be reminded that your children are watching how you interact with technology and drawing conclusions about what really matters to you. Subscribe if these conversations help you think more clearly about the relationship between digital advancement and family connection. And remember, your children will not remember every innovation you created or every goal you achieved, but they will remember whether you made them feel like they were more important to you than any screen or device. What question might your children ask you if they felt safe to be completely honest about what your relationship with technology communicates to them about your priorities?